Being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Patrick Christys. As Suella Braverman reveals that a staggering 100 million people are eligible to gain British citizenship under the current laws, will Rishi Sunak's bold words be backed up by tough action?
You come here illegally. You can't claim asylum. You can't benefit from our modern slavery protections. You can't make spurious human rights claims.
I will give my verdict on Sunak's desperately needed illegal migration bill and take aim at the predictably snobbish MSM response in my digest next. Then I will get the view of my superstar panel, and tonight I'm very pleased to be joined by Suzanne Evans, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reed. Where's the wave? Wave, everybody, wave. Show interest, Calvin. OK, all right. Also coming up, another day, another raft of bombshell lockdown files as it's revealed that Matt Hancock red-listed backbench Tory MPs who criticised lockdowns. One of those brave backbench rebels, Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, joins me to discuss the damage COVID authoritarianism did to our democracy. Plus, Fergie has broken her silence on Harry and Meghan.
Anne and I, we played a lot and had a great time, and I feel really strongly she would be absolutely, and so is the king, so proud of the grandchildren.
But would Diana be proud of their actions since they moved to California? Lady Victoria Harvey, Kevin Maguire and Richard Fitzwilliam duke it out on that in the Clash shortly. And later in the show, I will be joined by world-renowned biographer Tom Bower as he offers his frank assessment on the latest Sussex drama. As the author of best-selling children's book Goosebumps becomes the latest to be censored by his publishers, without permission, by the way, is freedom of speech under attack from woke sensitivity readers? Cultural historian Dr. Philip Kisserly weighs into that. Plus, the unashamedly biased BBC is at it yet again as it brazenly airs this anti-Tory hate.
What you call a corrupt far-right government.
Johnny Arbiter for unlawful conduct. Double trouble.
What you call a corrupt far-right government.
Huge numbers of people are going on strike.
So, with the Beeb seemingly giving up on impartiality, is it time we axe the licence fee, or should we just defund it altogether? That's our big debate in the media buzz. A first look at tomorrow's front pages and a new Greatest Britain and Union jackass coming up too. This is Dan Wootton Tonight with me, Patrick Christys. Let's go. Well, my digest on Sunak's illegal migration bill is coming up very shortly. I will take aim at the predictable snobbish scorn that it's facing from Westminster establishment wet wipes like Robert Peston. But before that, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story tonight. The Prime Minister has addressed potential migrants to the UK by saying if you come here illegally, you can't claim asylum or stay in the UK. Rishi Sunak says the government should be the one who decides who should enter the country, not the criminal gangs. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, earlier admitted it's likely the illegal migration bill may be incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. Well, at a news conference earlier on today, GBNews' Tom Harwood asked the Prime Minister if he's ready for any legal challenges.
Already legions of lawyers are preparing to tackle you over this legislation. Firstly, are you up for the fight? And secondly, what's plan B if they win?
Well, look, of course we're up for the fight and wouldn't be standing here if we weren't. But we're confident that we will win. There's absolutely nothing improper or unprecedented about pursuing bills with a 19(1)(b) statement. It absolutely does not mean that the bill is unlawful. We believe that it is lawful, that we are acting in compliance with our international obligations, and we are also meeting our obligations to the British public.
Sunak speaking earlier on today. Well, in news coming to us in the last hour, the RMT have called off planned train strikes after receiving an improved pay offer from Network Rail. Union members were due to take industrial action on the 16th and 17th of March. The organisation says further updates will be given on the national rail dispute in the coming days. Now, hundreds of people have tonight attended a vigil in Cardiff in memory of 3 people killed in a car crash. Eve Smith, Darcy Ross and Raffle Gian were found dead in the early hours of Monday morning. 2 others were taken to hospital but remain in a critical condition. Questions have been raised by friends and families as to why it took the police 2 days to find the group, despite them being reported missing. The Independent Office for Police Conduct says it's investigating the force's response. The trial of the man accused of murdering Olivia Pratt-Corbell has been told she was shot after running downstairs to her mother because she was scared. 9-year-old Olivia died after a gunman fired into her home in Liverpool last August. Manchester Crown Court heard the defendant, Thomas Cashman, had been lying in wait for his intended target on the evening of the shooting. He denies murder. And lastly, parts of northern England and Scotland were hit by a sudden cold snap today, with temperatures forecast to drop further to -15 in some regions. More than 4 inches of snow fell in northern Scotland and around 8 inches are forecast for later on in the week. A yellow weather warning for snow and ice remains in place for most of the UK, with tonight expected to be the coldest night of the year so far. That's all from me. I'm back in an hour. Now more from Patrick.
Good evening, everybody. Now, I was going to say it didn't take long for the establishment media to start whinging about Rishi's new plan to stop illegal immigration. But that would be a lie, because it was Robert Peston who asked the question.
Minister, you talked about the importance of swift removal. More than 2/3 of asylum seekers don't come from Albania. How is it compatible with the British traditions of humanity and compassion that you are criminalising, incarcerating, potentially forcing statelessness, homelessness, destitution on asylum seekers, many of whom are, as you accept, vulnerable and traumatised, before you have in place agreements with third countries to which you could move in a swift way, in your words, those asylum seekers.
Sorry. Let me just summarise what Peston's really said there. Rishi Sunak, you're a heartless bastard. You want to criminalise orphan children and then turf them out onto the streets. Were you born without a soul? Didn't take long, did it, Robert? But this is just the usual sneery, wet-white, metropolitan Westminster bubble media guff from people who would probably hemorrhage blood from their nose if they went further north than the Watford Gap. What Rishi Sunak is trying to do is make sure that people who come here illegally...
They are certainly going to be challenged in the courts. And will have no right to stay here. So it's very draconian stuff.
Have no right to stay here. God, we got there in the end. OK, and I don't think that's heartless. I don't think that that lacks compassion. And I think that accusations like that are actually quite offensive to the vast majority of British people. We are a kind and welcoming nation. Just ask the Ukrainian refugees, Afghan refugees, Hong Kongers, those fighting with British weapons on the Ukrainian front line, Jewish refugees after World War II, people of Bosnia, perhaps even the parents of our now Prime Minister and Home Secretary and previous Chancellor. I mean, I could go on, OK? I actually think the British public are pretty bloody generous. Somewhere in the region of £7 million a day of taxpayers' money goes to migrant hotels. Goodness knows how many millions it costs to collect these people from the Channel. The British taxpayer pays legal aid to people like Shamima Begum. The British taxpayer is paying a significant price for the war in Ukraine. The British taxpayer has paid hundreds of millions to the French to try to stop people drowning in the Channel. This notion that we're a horrible little nation with evil intent towards Channel migrants is rubbish. Why do they want to come here? Because we treat them better than many other countries. Now, I think insinuating that a Prime Minister is heartless or lacks compassion for trying to draw a line in the sand and saying enough is enough now is insulting to the majority of the British public. And all this pearl clutching about ignoring the ECHR. We ignored the ECHR when it came to prisoners having the vote, and nobody gave a toss about that. Other countries ignore them all the time. Figures show that we actually have a better history of abiding by the ECHR than a lot of places like Germany, France, Norway and more or less all of these other bastions of virtue on the continent. I think a lot of the media pushback on Sunak's latest plan is based on snobbery. Snobbery from people who were born into privileged positions, are used to people telling them how great and intellectual they are, who never have to worry about where their next paycheck comes from, who never have to worry about accessing their local GP because they've all got private healthcare. And if they were struck to a lie detector test, it would soon reveal that they believe everyone in Bolton, Barrow and Blackburn are subhuman cretins whose only joy in their pathetic, meaningless lives is bingo and gravy. A lot of these journalists criticising plans to stop the boats are completely blind to the impact illegal immigration has on people's lives because they just don't live in the same world as the ordinary, normal, everyday people who it affects. Well, those are my views. But to respond now is my superstar panel. It's political commentator Suzanne Evans. We've got GB News presenter and commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Fantastic stuff. What a panel. I can sense this one's going to be great tonight. Now, Suzanne, I will start with you, of course. What do you make of that?
What? Your comments?
All the media snobbery, I think, really, about it all. I mean, I can't help but feel as though some people just don't maybe get it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. You absolutely did. I mean, I'm not talking about ordinary, everyday journalists, but people like Robert Peston and people at his level have obviously made quite a lot of money, have done very well in their career. They don't understand the impact. He lives in the Westminster bubble. He talks to people who think like him, and he doesn't actually get out and talk to people who are affected by immigration, people who are having their jobs taken, people whose wages have been kept artificially low because of the huge amount of migration that we've had. And to call this country heartless, which, as he's rightly said, is what he's implying, is nonsense. As Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, said when she stood up in Parliament today, 450,000 refugees have come to this country since 2015 through safe and legal routes. If you're a genuine asylum seeker refugee, there's no need to pay people smugglers and get in a boat.
We'll continue with the theme of ladies first, so I'll come back to you, Calvin. Rebecca, do you think that what we're planning on doing here, what Rishi Sunak is planning on doing here, is heartless and lacks compassion?
I think it forgets that these are humans. So if there was a new rule that, like, mouthy, semi-brunette journalists were now under fire and I had to leave the country, I wouldn't just go to the first place I could get to. I wouldn't stop in Calais. I would want to find a way to get to somewhere where I had friends, where I spoke the language, where I had a support network, and I probably would use whatever savings I have to get in there, probably illegally. And I would do that for myself and for my child to set up a nice life. And I would lie if I needed to, get a fake passport if I needed to.
Yeah.
And I think most people would.
I understand that, but Calvin, should the leader of a country not try to stop that?
Of course they should. The first priority of a country's government is to protect the nation, and that means protecting the borders. It really frustrates me when these liberal elites say things like we're not welcoming, we're not compassionate, we're not inclusive. Of course we are. What they're doing there is they're using language to paint us as less than human, as less than forgiving, as less than compassionate. These people, like Peston, who say things like it's draconian, what they're doing there is they're being activists, they're not being journalists. The same with the journalist who interviewed Shamima Begum. It's like sympathising with the enemy. It's self-denigrating, it's self-hatred. What is wrong with protecting our borders?
I think you make a really, really good point, Calvin. You know, so often people who complain about immigration are called racist, they're called right-wing, they're called bigots. We are dehumanised if we
sometimes
complain.
they are a bit
and
racist.
actually, you know, it's exactly the same criticism that people make about people being anti-immigration. They say you're dehumanising migrants. Well, they're dehumanising the people that want control.
Well, respond to that, Rebecca, because I fully admit, absolutely, 100%, we all know that there are racists out there, OK? And some people who do not want people to come across the channel already want to, frankly, come to this country are racist, right? But that's not the vast majority of people at all. In fact, I would say it's a really extreme minority of people. Do you not think that... In fact, the opposite might be true when it comes to certain elements of the media who do look at people up north who say, I don't want a migrant hotel in my backyard, and they just think they're scum.
I mean, bingo and gravy was a very funny line, I will give you that.
Thank you very much.
However, I disagree that it's just people who have private healthcare who are not impacted by it. I don't care at all about immigration. I feel good about immigration. I'm chill about it. Not really sure if I even believe in borders that much. I use a normal GP. I'm about to use a normal primary school, not for myself. And generally speaking, I use all of the services that people need to use. And I don't feel that anything's being taken from me by sharing it with people. I don't really understand why I, just by dint of being born here, deserve all these amazing things that other people don't deserve.
But you just said there that you just don't really believe in borders.
Not really sure I do.
Right, well, that's quite...
Usually when Dan's here, I say that and it really upsets him.
Yes, no, I'm aware of that, and I gave you a little bit more bandwidth, but now I'm incensed, OK? Calvin, no, do you not think that this is mad? No, I'm sorry, I'm only...
It is madness, it doesn't make any sense.
It makes Calvin
If we don't have borders, then what are we? We're not a nation, we're just a collective of people.
But surely, like, even as a Christian point of view, the idea
Nations
that some of us deserve things... Sorry, you think that God made me rich and white and middle class and somebody else poor and in a war zone?
See, that's what the left do. They
choice.
conflate things. I said nations are God ordained. You bring race into it, you bring class into it.
OK, fine. But you think God decided Bexy deserves to be British, Shamima deserves... Well, actually, no, Shamima is British.
Come on, I mean, the whole world would fall apart if all the borders were taken away tomorrow.
All right.
Society
I want to just ask
there'd be no NHS, no welfare state. The world that you
would need some change. It would need some changes. I fully respect.
Now, look, we've dealt with the media response to this. We've dealt with, bizarrely, there being no borders in your world, OK? So that's that. But I want to know whether or not you actually think that Rishi Sunak is going to have the balls to pull this off. Suzanne?
I hope he's got the balls to pull it off. I think he's going to be right up there against the courts. I'm slightly concerned that this is just a political tactic to try and out Labour as being pro-immigration, and whether or not he actually succeeds doesn't matter. But time will tell.
Calvin?
He hasn't said what the cap's going to be. He hasn't said how he's going to deport these people. He hasn't said how he's going to challenge the laws. It's going to be against the ECHR. How is he going to do any of this?
No, but this is a good point, and I'm going to stay with you on this, because actually the thing that we haven't genuinely touched on yet is how good we think this is. Now, it's a signal of intent. That's why I'm bagging on about it. It's a signal of intent, and I think that a lot of the pushback comes from people who don't believe in borders, and there is that. But actually, from what he's said so far, do you think he goes even far enough?
No, there's no meat and veg in this whatsoever. He hasn't said how he's going to implement any of this, and I don't think he can pull it off.
But that's
We've
what they
seen
do every
this over
time.
And over again.
But Priti Patel did it before.
Exactly.
Zoella did it. It's just that their
exactly.
policy is say something mean and do nothing
here.
real.
Have a bit of red
and it's
meat.
that makes everyone cross. It makes me cross. It makes Calvin cross. It probably makes Suzanne cross. It's not a good policy.
So we're all cross, but for very different reasons. And you love to see it. That's what the point of this show is, apparently. Look, get your views coming in, everybody. I still want to hear what you think. Still to come, though, of course, after the latest shocking revelations about Hancock's COVID rule of terror, including his plot to block disability funding for Tory lockdown rebels. Should he be hauled out in front of MPs in Parliament? The self-proclaimed Chief Gammon, June Slater, gives Hancock both barrels, and that is coming your way very, very shortly. But first, as Sarah Ferguson claims that Princess Diana would be proud of Harry and Meghan's family, would she be proud of their actions since moving to California? Kevin Maguire, Lady Victoria Hervey and Richard Fitzwillis, what a clash that is, by the way, do battle, and that is coming your way very, very shortly. Let us know what you think. Email us, dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet us using that handle @gbnews. Oh, yes, and of course, there's a poll up there as well, so you can get your votes coming in. I've seen a tick.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go. But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Yes, it's time now for The Clash. So, Prince Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, has said that she believes Princess Diana would have been very proud of Harry and Meghan and their family were she alive today, while speaking at a book event in New York last night. Watch.
I think Diana and I, we played a lot and had a great time. And I feel really strongly she would be absolutely, and so would the king, so is the king, so proud of the grandchildren and the family. And I do believe that in family unity, and it's called my 3 C's.
What
Communicate, compromise, compassion. I really believe in that. And I think forgiveness is key.
Forgiveness is key. Now, Fergie's comments may come as a bit of a shock, considering the relentless attacks the Sussexes have launched on the royal family since they abandoned Britain in 2020. But what do you think? Would Princess Diana really be proud of Harry and Meghan's actions since moving to California? Send me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me, obviously, at GBNews. There's also a poll running there, so you can vote in that. I'll bring you the results very shortly. Come on, the clock's ticking, people. Get to it. But to duke it out, I am joined by Associate Editor at the Daily Mirror, it's Kevin Maguire, Royal Commentator Richard Fitzwilliams, and socialite and former girlfriend of Prince Andrew as well, Lady Victoria Hervey. Thank you very, very much, everyone, for joining me. It's always ladies first, although this time even more literally than I usually mean. Lady Victoria, do you think that Princess Diana would be proud of Harry and Meghan at the moment?
I think she would be proud of the fact that he left, he went to California. You know, that was supposed to be one of her dreams, to move to Malibu and, you know, get away from the press. So I think that respect, that he's managed to build a life. But I don't think she would be so proud of what's happened with the two brothers just being at war with each other. I don't, you know, that was one of the things that she felt very strongly about, was for them to be friends growing up. And I do not believe Diana would approve of, you know, Harry and William.
All right, so a mixed bag from you. Richard, I'll bring you in now. Richard Fitzwilliams, do you think Diana will be proud of the utter mess?
I think that Diana would recognise a dreadful mess where she saw it. I mean, I agree that the tragedy of the brothers and their very deep split, it goes back far longer than one realised. I think that would cause her a great deal of grief, but there's no doubt she was very unconventional. We just need to remember the Morton book and the launch of that, and then also the duped, tragically, the Panorama interview, which was actually a job application, which was positive. Diana did so much and achieved so much. One of the extraordinary things was how few years the Sussexes actually spent between May 2018 and the very end of their time as senior working royals, January 2021. That's very little time. I think Diana had a sense of history. I think she would see through the emptiness of so much of this and the fact that so much of it is destructive, although, of course, Diana was deeply complex.
Well, she was indeed. And Kevin, look, Diana seemed to have actual purpose, OK? She did some actual charity work. She did things with landmines in Africa, etc. Prince Harry, all he's done is win. Surely she wouldn't be proud of that, Kevin?
Yeah, he's campaigned on mental health, not just his own, other people's too, in Africa, on wildlife. But look, you think of Diana, what does any mother, any father, any parent want? You want your children to be happy. Now, I agree she would be very unhappy that the boys, her sons, have fallen out, unquestionably. But would she be unhappy that Harry is having a go at the father she divorced and Camilla, the third person in their marriage? I suspect not. If we need a Ouija board, really, to find out what she's
But William, though, we don't need a Ouija board to find out that she wouldn't have wanted Harry to reveal that stuff about William.
But come on, she would love the pops at Camilla, the stepmother who got in the way. She would love it. And also Harry has broken away. He's gone to do his own thing. Now, we can criticise a lot of it, and sometimes he doesn't speak wisely, I believe, and he may regret some of the things that are said publicly, but he is doing his own thing. She would adore that.
Well, you see, now, this is the thing, Kevin. And
across to California to see them.
I'm going to bring Lady Victoria back in here because is he doing his own thing? Surely she wouldn't be proud of the fact that he's been led astray by a pound shop soap actress.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like they've taken him off to America. You know, I feel like the whole Meghan thing. I mean, look, obviously anyone wants their child to be happy and all of that, but it just feels like he's just been given all this information, like, oh, they did this to your mother, and then he's going out there and just sort of pounding it and getting all his anger out. And goodness knows what medication they're even giving him. You know, this is America. They give you pills for anything over there. So he's probably on all kinds of meds at the moment as well.
Yeah, Richard, well, a slightly similar vein. Richard, I mean, do you think that Diana would be happy about Prince Harry essentially advocating drug use?
I think that she would regard that as being unwise, because the one thing Diana always did, she noted the polls, she noted how popular she was, and of course, as Kevin has said, I mean, she achieved a very great deal herself. But if you see your polling absolutely seismically dropping, which the Sussexes are in the 2 Newsweek polls, I think that that would be a source of very, very considerable concern. I mean, Diana would certainly not want Harry to be as unhappy as he has been, but to see drugs and also the penile frostbite, the way he lost his virginity, this sort of thing in Spain, you wonder who is advising him. And I think that Diana, just to estimate, I would have thought she would want someone to give him advice that was constructive, to see the two of them on a path that you can at least see that it's not just attacking the hand that feeds them, because the only reason they've got the contracts they've got are the members of the royal family.
Kevin, I'll go to you in a second, all right, but I just want to ask, look, Lady Victoria, you alluded to the old prescription drug stuff in America, so whilst we're talking about this, how do you think that Diana would have responded to Harry's revelations about psychedelics and marijuana and all that stuff?
Well, I mean, I think that anybody right now, he's going too far, and it's almost like he's the type of person that could be suicidal or something. Like he's so delicate right now, and he's showing that by the way he's acting out with everything. And I think it's kind of like quite dangerous, actually, that the way he is being encouraged to keep talking and keep, you know, talking about all these problems. And I don't know. I don't look what happened to Diana. It did not end well. So I think there's got to be a limit to this.
Yeah, Kevin, with respect, I mean, would Diana actually particularly be wanting Harry to follow in her footsteps, as it were? I mean, she was famously quite unhappy.
No, she'd want to do good deeds but be happy. And look, he's clearly missing a mother's arm around him, and a mother's love is unconditional. And she could put him on the straight and narrow and give him some good advice. But she would, I am just sure, I just keep coming back to it, she would love and adore and respect and admire that he is being his own person, and he is against the institution. The brother problem would be huge for a mother. It would be huge for Diana. It would be huge for anybody. But
do you think, Kevin? Do you think, Kevin? Yeah, on that. Do you actually think, Kevin, that Diana would be quite happy if Prince Harry's bombshell revelations in his book, in Oprah, in Netflix, had more of an impact and actually brought the monarchy crumbling down?
That might be going too far. I think she was a monarchist. She had a lot of problems, not least with her husband. But I'm not sure she wanted Britain to be a republic. I don't think she went to bed reading books about Oliver Cromwell. I don't think that happened.
No, I suppose not. Richard, I can see you chuckling away there as well. One thing that Fergie did talk about was that forgiveness is key and everything. So do you think that, realistically, Diana might actually want Harry and William to make up now? It's very difficult, though, to see how that happens, isn't it, given all these revelations?
I think any mother would
Yes, essentially, of course she would, but equally the chances of it now, foreseeably, I'd say very, very limited, if they exist at all. I mean, it's really been a tremendously bruising rift. With reference to Fergie, I mean, she is, of course, being as helpful as she can with these comments, but given her own role as a royal, I mean, it was so disastrous. From time to time, I wished her creation, Budgie, the little helicopter pilot, would spirit her away to another planet.
OK, Lady Victoria, I'm just going to ask you a little bit about Fergie, really, because she did appear to contradict Meghan. Meghan, I think, had said that she taught her how to curtsy and all of this, and Fergie piped up and said she's hardly ever met the woman, you know? Is it another Markle lie?
I really don't know, actually. I couldn't comment on that, actually. I have no idea.
No, OK, fair enough. All right, so do you think it's worthwhile that Fergie should be continuing to comment on this kind of thing, though?
Who's that question?
Well, to you. Oh, well, Richard's piped up, but it was actually to Lady Victoria.
Oh, it's to me.
Go on, Lady Victoria.
Look, I mean, I think I really don't know what to say about that, because obviously Meghan has been caught out lying quite a few times about things, so I don't believe that everything that she says is honestly true.
OK, well, go on, Richard. I'll give you the word, because you were straight out the traps there.
Well, I have to say that Fergie is she's no Yoda. One has to agree about that. I think she wants an invitation to the coronation. I think she's back in the fold insofar as she's going to be. And I do think that she's spreading nice comments around with it, if you look at the Hello interview. But frankly, I mean, I think Diana would be deeply, deeply upset that the princes were so deeply at odds. There's no doubt about that. What else she would have felt? I mean, of course, there's no doubt that she was desperately unconventional, and no, she did not wish Camilla well, and I can't necessarily see her wishing Camilla well now, but then that is something we can always speculate on.
Yeah, Kevin, just a word on the role of Fergie, then. Do you think that she needs to just pipe down a little bit? Is it interesting that she's still hovering around?
Well, Fergie's about Fergie, isn't she? She's got to appear relevant still. But I suppose if you look from the outside, if she's trying to build bridges, it's not a bad thing, is it, really?
No, fair enough. Look, I thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you very, very much, all of you. Great to have you on the show. What a clash that was. That was Associate Editor at the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, Royal Commentator Richard Fitzwilliams, and socialite and former girlfriend of Prince Andrew, Lady Victoria Hervey. Great stuff. OK, right, I've got absolutely loads coming your way, and I want to reveal who you think you agree with. So, would Princess Diana be proud of Harry and Meghan's actions since they moved to California? Holly on Twitter says, Diana would not be proud. She would be horrified at the way that Meghan has isolated Harry from his friends and family. Very sad. Marty on Twitter says Diana would be appalled by everything Ginger and Winder are doing. How they are attacking the royal family and British people. Yasmin on Twitter says Diana would be proud that Harry and Meghan have chosen their own lives, something that she probably wished she could have done. And your verdict is now in. 10% of you agree that Princess Diana would be proud of Harry and Meghan, while 90% of you say Diana most certainly wouldn't be. So there we go. Strong stuff as ever. Thank you very much, everyone who took part in that. Coming up, as the best-selling author of Goosebumps slams publishers for censoring his beloved books, are woke sensitivity readers a threat to freedom of speech? Cultural historian Dr. Philip Kisely weighs in. But first, as Matt Hancock's COVID campaign of psychological terror is exposed, should the disgraced former Health Secretary be dragged before MPs in Parliament? Self-proclaimed Chief Gammon, the straight-talking June Slater unleashes on hapless Hancock, and that, you wonderful people, is next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
June Slater is tonight's Outsider. Now, the latest revelations from Matt Hancock's leaked WhatsApp show that far from following the science, as the government claimed, Hancock in fact rejected advice from Chief Medical Officer Sir Chris Whitty that would have seen COVID isolation time slashed for fear of implying we've been getting it wrong. And perhaps even more shocking, yesterday it was revealed that Hancock planned to use funding for new disability centres as leverage to pressure fellow Tory James Daly into backing his dystopian lockdown measures. I mean, the implication there is that he held disabled people to ransom, and that, frankly, is pretty much gutter stuff. June Slater using a learning disability hub in Bury as a political threat. That has to be a new low, doesn't it? June is with me now. Yes, there she is. Self-proclaimed Chief Gammon. Good stuff. OK, I mean, that is, some would say, pretty scummy, June.
Well, I'm not surprised. Am I the only one that isn't surprised at this?
No, you're right.
This man has actually held the country to ransom. What he's done with the disabled funding is absolutely disgusting. And not only that, he's had the audacity to go on a game show. This man has led the whole Parliament down a route that they could have avoided. What were the 650 wimps doing in Parliament? Nobody stood up to him. Nobody stood up and said, look, this is tyranny. We're not going with it.
I'm sorry, June, as well, but it's not...
challenging.
June, let me come in on that, because it's not just the wimps in Parliament, right? We heard earlier, didn't we, from the likes of Robert Peston, who was there, the classic, oh, what you want to do? You want to stop the boats coming off, do you? You heartless... I won't do it, because it'll take me all night to repeat his question. But they were all there parroting what Hancock was saying about a new variant. Part of the reason why Hancock could get away with this stuff is because he knew he could just feed it out to a lot of people in the mainstream media, and they'd all go, new variant, locked down forever, just shackle yourself to Chris Whitty's radiator, you know? And actually, they have a bit to blame as well, don't they?
The media are totally to blame. How many times did we sit and watch those bulletins and see those useless articles that call themselves journalists? You're not journalists. You're not fit to be on the TV. You're not fit to report anything. You're taking a wage. You never asked one decent question. Every single person in this country had question after question on the tip of their tongue, and these people just asked the standard narrative. The media are to blame. I exclude GB News in this because you were quite good. You were very good, actually. You were the only one covering it. Peston, hang your head in shame. Jeremy Vine, hang your head in shame. What you did was fuel a narrative you must have known to be wrong. The people of this country knew it was wrong. People were screaming at their MPs, emailing their MPs. Nobody took any notice. 650 wimps in Parliament, backed up by a journalist culture that has really lost the plot.
You know what, next time, June, you just come on and say what you really think, yeah? Is that all right? But, no, like, seriously, though, when you look at what should happen to Matt Hancock now, I had Sir Jake Berry on my earlier show today. He's former chairman of the Tory party and has a son who's got special needs to an extent, right? So, obviously, this idea that a disability centre in Bury was potentially held to ransom as a result of an MP there not voting for the lockdown measures hits hard for him. He wants Hancock, and he used the phrase to me, dragged back to Parliament. Would you drag Hancock back to Parliament to face questions about this?
Well, I'd drag him at the back of an Austin Healey and drag him on a bumpy road. I'm sorry, I suppose that's quite a terrible thing to suggest. But this man, what's the point in bringing him back to Parliament? What are they going to do? They did nothing for us. Now they want to have a go at him because it suits to have a fall guy. What were you doing, you lot? Why didn't you stand up to... Because the thing here, Patrick, what we've got to watch here is this lot in Parliament will turn this round. They'll spin it. And I'll tell you how they'll spin it. Oh, well, we got it so wrong the last time. The best thing we can do is hand all this responsibility over to the WHO. Or the people that caused it in the first place. The people that sat in a meeting guessing at social distancing. Well, should we make it 2 metres or 3? 3 or 2? We'll go for 2. That's how our laws were made. That's how we got locked down. They guessed. Every single thing they implemented was guesswork. And the whole lot of them should stand up in Westminster and be as enthusiastic as they are about clapping Zelensky and apologise to the British people for not having the backbone to stand up for us.
I can't believe I have to do this for the second time in 2 nights on this show, but yet again, I would like to emphasise that we do not condone violence of any kind. June, though, on this note, you know, when we look at what these WhatsApp revelations appear to show, and they appear to show that Matt Hancock didn't do everything that he could to stop elderly people either living in misery in care homes alone or, in some cases, maybe dying, didn't do everything that he possibly could have done to make sure that children got to go to school and do normal childhood things, didn't do everything he possibly could, to say the least, to protect our freedoms, and now didn't do everything he possibly could to have helped for a centre for disabled children to open. Now, I know Matt Hancock would vehemently deny all of this stuff, and we've probably got a statement from him coming your way soon. But at what point do you have to look at it and go, I mean, is there an argument to say there's something maybe that goes beyond heartless and slightly towards evil about this?
Well, I'm not a big fan of using dramatic phrases, but there's something seriously wrong. He's behaving like a sociopath would, and a sociopath can't see when they've got it wrong. I mean, I think he should go for counselling to make sure he's normal. He shouldn't be in office any longer. If Rishi had any backbone, he'd have him out. Because somebody who, you know, if something goes wrong in a company, the CEO takes the brunt, the person in charge. Boris was weak. Looking at the WhatsApp exchanges, clearly Boris was reluctant to lock down, but had a little tyrant. Unfortunately, Matt Hancock was enjoying the power. I'm surprised he didn't come to work in a cape with his underpants over his tights, because I think that's how he saw himself. A bit like Robin out of Batman. Not Batman, because he's quite fit, but Robin with the little spindly legs. Yeah, let's go. I just imagine him standing at the podium and pow, zap. He really does see himself like that. He's an annoying character for me. He annoys me. But not only that, I mean, what about that time when he said, oh, it's been tragic for me, you know, my brother's, mother's, sister's, husband's next door neighbour's cat sitter died of COVID.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's absolutely bonkers stuff. And June, as well, you mentioned his pants there. It might have been easy for him if he'd kept them on, to be fair. But there is also another element to this, which is the kind of ham acting. Like, when we see now the revelations in these WhatsApps about a new variant, there were people who were saying, I don't quite buy all of this stuff about, you know, the kind of scariant element of it. And people were seeing through it at the time. And those people were hounded. They were called things like COVID deniers, or they were called lockdown deniers, or they wanted to kill Granny. And and then you add that as well to the likes of the people who are now saying, I don't particularly want a migrant hotel in my tiny little village. And they go, oh, you're a frothing racist bigot. And they go, oh, well, I just think that maybe the taxpayers are spending a little bit too much money when it comes to various different foreign affairs stuff over there. Oh, right. Also, you want Putin to own Europe, do you? And it's like, well, no. Do you not think that people are sick and tired of being demonised for having what are actually quite rational views that just seem to go against what the establishment media think?
Well, yeah, we're being run by people they have tantrums. They have tantrums until you shut up. It's like the kid in the supermarket that wants an extra sweet or toy and you buy it because it's just to shut it up. That's what they do. It's racism. And this anti-vax, that gets me. I've got 2 tetanus jabs. I've had meningitis jabs. I've had the polio thing. I'm not anti-vax. My dogs are all vaccinated. That's not anti-vax. Grow a pair and grow up. People like Andrew Neil using phrases like anti-vax. People like him should know better. That isn't anti-vax.
But it's demonisation. Can I just say the latest one as well is okay. So if you are too poor to be able to buy a new car that is compliant with ULEZ, and you're worried about whether or not you're going to be able to turn the heating on, then you are in coalition with the far right. Which, I mean, it's absolutely bonkers, isn't it, June? But look, June, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much. I thoroughly enjoyed this. That was a right laugh. June Slater there. Thank you very much. Self-proclaimed Chief Gammon. You love to see it. Our spokesperson for Matt Hancock said the message exchanges were taken out of context. He added, the missing context here is vitally important because this vote was critical for saving lives. The right place to consider everything about the pandemic objectively is in the public inquiry. So there we go. Coming up, as Keir Starmer suggests that he will whip Labour's MPs to oppose the government's migrant crackdown, would our borders be at risk under a left-wing government? What borders, some would say? My superstar panel tackle this, and the first of tomorrow's papers just after 10 p.m. But coming up next, with popular children's book Goosebumps, the latest to fall victim to woke sensitivity readers. Is freedom of speech in literature now under attack? Cultural historian Dr. Philip Kisely has his say, and that is coming your way in just a few seconds.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me,
Lawrence Fox on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Now, the woke mind virus continues to take hold on society, and in particular, our most treasured literature. After the controversy of Square publishers rewriting Roald Dahl books over fears that his work would offend snowflakes, childhood favourite Goosebumps books are now also being sanitised at the altar of political correctness. Goosebumps author R.L. Stine accused his publisher Scholastic of editing references to mental health and weight in his books. Crucially, though, this is without his permission. One character is now described as cheerful rather than plump, which, frankly, are two completely different things, but there we go. References to villains making victims slaves have been removed, and the word crazy has been changed to silly, which I think we can all agree is pretty crazy. In one of the novels, a character wearing a Halloween costume dressed as a dark and stormy night no longer wears black face paint. Now, Scholastic said that it made the changes to keep the language current and avoid imagery that could negatively impact a young person's view of themselves today, with a particular focus on mental health. I am joined now by cultural historian Dr. Philip Kisely. Thank you very, very much. Now, is freedom of speech under attack, or actually just anything really, children's literature under attack from ridiculous woke sensitivity readers?
Hi, Patrick. Yes, is the short answer. I think we all know it is. And I don't think it's about inclusion. I was just thinking about this. So the excuse is, oh, it's about inclusion. We've got to include everybody. And it's not really. What it's really about is destruction of tradition, isn't it? Because all the people who bang on about inclusion, bang on about diversity, bang on about equity, that's the new one, that's the really big one. They don't want to include white working class males. They don't want to include gender critical women. They don't want to include Brexiteers. They don't want to include people they would call Karens or gammon, like me. So I think it's just a complete lie.
But if they did include them, they would sneer at them, or they would make subtle digs, or they would include someone who was loosely something like the kind of character that you've decided there, who would be the butt of every single joke. I just wonder whether or not you could get a book published these days if it wasn't about some kind of transgender double amputee with mental health problems who was, I don't know, in some other case, riding a rainbow wheelchair or something like that. I mean, I just don't think you would get a children's book published today about a white working class boy.
No, and what you've just described there is too subtle for them, I think. So I think there's a whole, the whole industry is completely and utterly captured. Okay, and it's not captured from the top. This isn't kind of chief executives and managing directors and artistic directors telling people what to do. It's captured by 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds. It's captured by graduates who cry, who go on strike, who if they see the name Jordan Peterson, for example, they
sick,
literally
aren't they?
And scream,
they're just sick everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just show them a picture of Jordan Peterson, they just vomit all over themselves. They just can't handle it. I do find it interesting though, because part of me, hear me out on this, part of me thinks good actually, because if I am ever unfortunate enough to have offspring, then if I just don't raise them to be absolute woke wet wipes and have these ridiculous books read to them about reversing gender norms and stuff, maybe they'll just conquer the world.
Well, I think that's true, but I think if you look at the broader context, so if you look at what happens in schools, and I don't know if you've been to a school lately, I have, they are like Soviet indoctrination camps, So I walked into a school, and I'm not even joking, it's just so awful. I walked into a school, a secondary school, a few weeks ago, and there was a mural, a Soviet-style mural on the wall to BLM, and everything we know about BLM, you turn a corner and there's a mural dedicated to the NHS, okay? So it really is an indoctrination, okay? That's school. It starts at primary school. It starts with this stuff that they're reading, okay? The teachers are all essentially the same. They go from primary school to secondary school, they go to university. And that's where this stuff really, really flourishes. And the tragedy is that young people who have really inquiring minds, who would be reading some amazing stuff like Roald Dahl, if you've got all of the wonderful imagery taken out of that and you're left with the boring nonsense. I mean, there was one thing, a really hilarious thing. They're talking about women with wigs, and they don't just edit, they add on stuff as well. And there was a woman with a wig, and the added on line from the sensitivity reader was, "And there's nothing wrong with that." You know what I mean? So there's a sense of...
I mean, there isn't, but you don't need to say it.
Let me just make the point. Children are playful, and children are connoisseurs of the grotesque, yeah? And if they've got the right parameters in which to explore that kind of thing, they can really develop. If what grown-ups are doing is they're absolutely destroying those parameters by just giving them no sense of development as far as that's concerned, the ordinary things in life. But as far as sex is concerned, they're completely sexualizing.
Well, they
children.
are. Yeah, exactly. You can't possibly... I'm going to have to interrupt because we're out of time, but you're right. Just quickly, you can't possibly have someone think that a woman wearing a wig is in any way untoward whatsoever, but you can introduce a drag queen in a thong to an infant, and that's absolutely fine. Dr. Philip Caselli, thank you very, very much. Cultural historian and lecturer at the University of Leeds. Stay tuned, everybody. I've got loads coming your way. We've run out of time, but you just have to stay tuned and find out what the heck it is. Peace out.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys, and tonight, our Suella Braverman reveals that a staggering 100 million asylum seekers could settle in the UK under current laws. The Home Secretary and Prime Minister have announced today that enough is enough.
You come here illegally. You can't claim asylum. You can't benefit from our modern slavery protections. You can't make spurious human rights claims.
But while Rishi tries to end the scourge of illegal migration, Slippery Starmer, as always, is playing petty politics.
I think going on with this sort of legislation is the way forward. Why not put the money and the resource into the National Crime Agency and break the gangs who are running this?
What's a woman, Keir? Anyway, to use Braverman's words, would it be closed minds and open borders under a Labour government? I will get the views of my superstar panel next. And tonight I am joined by Suzanne Evans, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reed. Wave, people. Wait, no, there's no enthusiasm whatsoever. No enthusiasm. There we go. Right, fine. OK, move on. OK. As the former health or should I say stealth secretary, Matt Hancock, is exposed for his COVID campaign of psychological terror. I will speak to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, one of 95 Tory MPs red-listed by the Hancock team for challenging lockdowns. Sir Geoffrey joins me live shortly. In other news, the BBC have given up on pretending to be impartial.
What do you call a corrupt far-right government?
Sorry, arbiter for unlawful conduct. Double trouble.
What do you call a corrupt far-right government?
Huge numbers of people are going on strike.
Got there in the end. So, as the broadcaster peddles blatant anti-Tory hate, does the licence fee need to be axed? We will debate that in our media buzz. Plus, as Fergie goes on tour, no, not Sir Alex, and gives some life advice to Harry and Meghan, esteemed royal biographer Tom Bower offers his frank assessment of the latest Sussex drama. And will Labour's new Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, be nominated for Greatest Britain or Union Jackass? Find out before the night's up. And the first front pages will arrive in mere moments too, right after the wonderful Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening. The top story tonight on GB News. The Prime Minister has addressed potential migrants to the UK, saying if you come here illegally, you can't claim asylum or stay in the UK. Rishi Sunak says the government should be the one who decides who should enter the country, not the criminal gangs. And the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, earlier admitted it's likely the illegal migration bill may be incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. Well, at a news conference earlier today, GB News' Tom Harwood asked the Prime Minister if he's ready for any legal challenges.
Already legions of lawyers are preparing to tackle you over this legislation. Firstly, are you up for the fight? And secondly, what's plan B if they win?
Well, look, of course we're up for the fight and we'd be standing here if we weren't. But we're confident that we will win. There's absolutely nothing improper or unprecedented about pursuing bills with a 19(1)(b) statement. It absolutely does not mean that the bill is unlawful. We believe that it is lawful, that we are acting in compliance with our international obligations. And we are also meeting our obligations to the British public.
Rishi Sunak. Now, tonight, the RMT called off planned train strikes after receiving an improved pay offer from Network Rail. Union members were due to take industrial action on the 16th and 17th of March. But the organisation says further updates will now be given on the national rail dispute, and that'll come in the next few days. In South Wales, hundreds of people have been at a vigil in Cardiff with relatives setting off fireworks to celebrate the lives of 3 people killed in a car crash. Eve Smith, Darcy Ross and Raffle Gian were found dead in the early hours of Monday morning. 2 others were taken to hospital but remain in a critical condition. And questions have been raised by friends and families as to why it took police 2 days to find the group despite them being reported missing. The Independent Office for Police Conduct says it's investigating the force's response. And the trial of the man accused of murdering Olivia Pratt-Call-Bell has been told today she was shot running downstairs to her mother because she was scared. 9-year-old Olivia died after a gunman fired shots into her home in Liverpool last August. Manchester Crown Court heard the defendant, Thomas Cashman, had been lying in wait for his intended target on the evening of the shooting. He denies murder. And parts of northern England and Scotland were hit by a sudden cold snap today, with temperatures forecast to drop further to -15 in some parts of the UK. More than 4 inches of snow fell in northern Scotland and around 8 inches are forecast for later on this week. A yellow weather warning for snow and ice remains in place for many areas within the UK, with tonight expected to be the coldest night of the year so far. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Back now to Patrick Christus.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. Well, let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages hot off the press. Yes, sad one this. Mum, I'm scared is the headline in the Metro. as the last words of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, the 9-year-old girl shot dead last August, were heard in court today. Yes, absolute shocker, that one, isn't it? My superstar panel are back with me, though. Political commentator Suzanne Evans, GB News presenter and commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, the Tory government is having yet another crack at sorting the Channel migrant crisis. But it's not just lefty lawyers and do-gooders standing in their way, no. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has given a huge hint that he'll order the opposition benches to vote against the plans when it comes to the crunch.
The government said, and I quote, it would break the business model, it would end illegal migration. So that was precisely 12 months ago with the legislation they were proposing to pass and did pass then. And what's happened since? The numbers have gone up. So I don't think going on with this sort of legislation is the way forward. Why not put the money and the resource into the National Crime Agency and break the gangs who are running this?
Yes, OK. Well, it's important to remember, I think, that unlike Rishi Sunak, Starmer did not include tackling illegal immigration in his fabled 5 missions for fixing Britain. In doing so, he ignores illegal migrants in waiting, like this chap in a French camp destined for Britain, who the Times newspaper tonight has revealed who was already previously deported by the UK for raping a 12-year-old girl, apparently. Typically, Labour was still out of ideas in Parliament again today, with Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper slamming the new plan as chaos. Here's the moment Home Secretary Suella Braverman hit back.
This Prime Minister will stop the boats, and if the people want closed minds and open borders, then they can rely on Labour.
Well, there we go. So with Labour doing a lot of complaining and not yet offering one decent policy idea, are our borders at even greater risk under a left-wing Labour government? Look, I'm going to go over to you, Suzanne, on this. So, because the thing for me is, I think Rishi Sunak is trying to make it a question of, if you want open borders, vote Labour. Is that what he's trying to do?
I don't think that's quite what he's saying, but that's the upshot of it. You only have to look, Tony Blair came into power in 1997, and since then, migration has gone up and up and up and up and up. And to be fair, the Tories haven't done anything about it. You remember, I think in the last 3 successive election manifestos, they've pledged to bring immigration down to the tens of thousands, and they've abjectly failed. I've been saying for a while, if the Tories can stop the boats, they've got a fighting chance of winning the next election. If they don't stop the boats, they're going to lose it. But it could be the case that because Keir Starmer's coming out and saying, well, we're not going to prioritise it, we're going to be same old, open borders, pro-immigration, then I think people are going to think twice again about voting Labour as a protest against the Conservative government, which, of course, is deeply unpopular at the moment.
I think, Rebecca, there is a sense that maybe the Labour Party cares more about what's going on abroad than it does about its own people. Hear me out on this, which is that, we've got to uphold international law. We've got to be compassionate to people coming here illegally. Whereas actually, maybe, in traditional times, Labour used to be the party of your ordinary working-class man and woman who are now absolutely copping it in the face of this migrant crisis.
Well, the Labour Party continue to have the same problem they've had for the last probably 7 or 8 years, which is that they're a party that has to try and encompass people like me and my much, much more left-wing friends who will have short fringes and septum piercings, and also people who live in not London. Bingo and gravy was the expression.
Bingo and gravy, yeah.
And those two groups of people are both natural Labour-oriented groups of people. However, they have very different views on things like trans issues and immigration. And so the one safe thing you can say, because we can all agree on it, is that the people smugglers are a problem, and that's why you should be focused. If I were Keir Starmer, all I would say for the next year would be, let's get rid of the people smugglers and nothing else. It's a very smart...
Yeah, but then you'd also have to say, presumably, Calvin, I would send in the SAS, because how else are you going to get rid of the people smugglers? Just make a whip.
Steady on with that one.
National Crime Agency.
I think Suzanne's right in that if Labour or the Conservatives want to win the next election, they have to have a solution, but I think it has to be done before the next election. And Keir Starmer in November said that actually we'll be tough on immigration too. Our last show in November, we talked about we'll have to wait and see, because I don't think he's talking, I don't think he's actually talking truth. But what he said was he was going to end immigration dependency. And I don't think the Labour Party truly want to do that. I think what they see is that it's the #1 issue for most people in this country, immigration.
Is it really?
Yes, it is. It is,
I would have
Rebecca.
thought the cost of living crisis was considerably more important to the majority of people in this country.
I think
on a
it
daily
is
basis.
on this
You
particular.
would, but that's because you're in the London bubble.
And at this particular time, it obviously is very crucial. But, historically, immigration has been right up there at the top over the last couple of 15 years or so. But you're wrong about Labour wanting to bring in the bingo and gravy crew, the Red Wall. They don't.
I'm
They
not. They want
forgot
to win the
about those
election,
people.
they know they have to. They do
forgot
want
about
to.
those people years
They
ago.
might not be
The Labour Party
want to.
The Labour Party is not.
If a man can't say what a woman is, how on earth is he going to crack a people smuggling gang?
What? Because some people
No, come on,
will
he's a
say that
softie, surely.
those two things don't require the same skill
Yeah, but
set.
it does imply that there's a little bit. I mean, does he have the bottle? He doesn't have the bottle
He has
to stand up to the trans lobby.
He has the strongest legal background of anybody in this entire conversation. And also, it is a little bit hilarious to me that Labour have been in power for 13 years. The Tories...
I know what you mean.
Wishful thinking. The Tories have been in power for 13 years. Labour have not. And yet somehow they were still casting around for reasons. This is Labour's fault. This is a pure Tory problem.
No, it's not Labour's fault. In fact, although it did skyrocket under Tony Blair, it started under John Major, the increase in immigration. So it is a Conservative problem.
Can I just say, Calvin, when I was literally glued, I was quite literally paid to watch Rishi Sunak's interaction earlier on.
Sorry to hear that, bro.
This news
Lucky
conference.
you.
I was doing my other show 3 till 6, and it's like Rishi Sunak's doing a news conference, right? With the bosh, there goes 45 minutes of my life. But I was listening to him, and I actually thought, now, see what you think about this, that he actually believed what he was saying, and he actually
they always do.
He did want to do something about it, and he was across his brief. There was a lot less of the just, we want to stop the boats. And there was actually some quite strong pushback, and I thought, you know what? Maybe Rishi's doing all right here.
You know what? Suella Braverman's a lawyer too. She's pretty good.
She's done nothing.
This is the point that I'm getting to.
Sorry.
Priti Patel is also pretty good. These people always believe what they're saying, and they're always pretty good, but they never actually follow through and do it, do they? Because it's so easy to stand up there with the rhetoric and make pronouncements, but to get on with the hard, nitty-gritty work of politicking, that is too difficult for them.
But, the question we're asking, is it going to be worse under Labour? And my conclusion has got to be yes. As you say, he is a lawyer. I think he cares very much about human rights law. I'm not sure he cares so much about illegal people smuggling, despite his comments today, or illegal immigration, or the criminal backgrounds of these people.
Explains me how worse it's going to be under Labour, because at some point we are going to run out of hotels. We are. And we are going to run out of places to put
Then let them work, and then they won't need to be in hotels.
So what? There you go. So what do we do?
So they take jobs off
We did just hear a story.
Take someone's job off them. That's not how it works.
Well, hang on. We did just see someone who's supposedly, anyway, waiting there in the Calais jungle area, who had been deported already, has been convicted of raping a young girl. You'd let them come in and work, would you?
No, if you've been convicted of raping somebody in this country.
But we don't know a lot.
They throw their paperwork away on the way into the country. That's the problem.
I'm not saying it's a perfect system at the moment. It could do with some reform.
No.
It could do with some reform. It could do with some reforming.
This is understatement of the year.
But if you know that if the paper knows that he raped somebody, then that can't be that
You'd
hard
like
to find
to think
out.
so, wouldn't you? You would like to think so, but yes, we'll have to wait and see. Let us know what you think at home, ladies and gents. Do you think it will be worse under Labour? Do you just want them to get on with it all anyway? Thank you very much. Coming up, my superstar panel debate whether the BBC licence fee needs to be axed after the broadcaster peddled more blatant anti-Tory hate. And next, I speak to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, one of 95 Tory MPs red-listed by the Hancock team for challenging lockdowns. We'll get his reaction to that chilling revelation of COVID authoritarianism in just a moment.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back, winners. Now, new revelations from the lockdown file show that the UK's leaders made a coordinated campaign to escalate public fear over COVID. WhatsApp messages published over the weekend exposed Matt Hancock telling his media advisor Damon Poole he wanted to deploy a new variant of the virus that would frighten the pants off the public just ahead of Christmas 2020. The same month, Hancock was trying to pass in Parliament the tiered system of regional COVID lockdowns, and 95 COVID-resistant backbench Tories were marked onto a secret red list. It's almost like something out of Stalin, isn't it? One of the MPs rated as a hardline rebel on the list was Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown. Alongside this comment, "No, will vote against Her Majesty's government or maybe abstain," feels like there is a lack of parliamentary scrutiny of the tier system. Well, I'm very pleased to say that Sir Geoffrey joins me now. And you would go on to abstain from that Parliament vote, wouldn't you, over regional lockdown? So why weren't you taken in by Project Fear?
Well, I just feel that the whole COVID policy at that time was just so unrelated to the facts. We weren't getting the proper facts. And above all, this is a freedom-loving nation. This goes against all our principles. It wasn't necessary to lock us down to the extent that we were. And I think Matt Hancock would be pleased to be operating the COVID policy in China. Such was the zeal that he wanted to lock every single person in their own home. And I just feel that it needed parliamentarians like me to stand up against this. And
well, yeah, but I've got to be honest with you, though, Sir Jeff. I've got to be honest with you, though, Sir Geoffrey. It's not a great look for the party that you love, that so many of those people that you described there as wanting to live in China and be so draconian, etc., unfortunately, are in your party, aren't they?
Well, I think it was people like me who stood up against the government that finally shocked the government in doing the right thing and letting us all live our normal lives before Christmas in 2021. Otherwise, we'd have been locked down again in Christmas 21. And it was that rebellion, that big rebellion in October, that stopped the thing dead. So I think that we who voted against the government did exactly the right thing to look after the interests of the people of this country.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people watching this will be immensely grateful to you. But Sir Geoffrey, if somebody like you, if someone of your eminent standing can be put on a red list and maybe ostracised a little bit and, well, it might be called the red list, it's a blacklist really, isn't it? Then does that not mean that for ordinary people like me and the audience here watching this, well, they should be very concerned. If they can do that to you, what can they do to me?
Well, that's what we're there for, Patrick, is to stand up to a government when it gets overmighty. And that is what I felt my duty was, and that is what I did. And I would do it again, because I think it is right that we treat the people of this country with respect and with having proper rights and not expecting them to be burdened by an overarching government.
So, Geoffrey, I think what these lockdown files have shown, in part, is the ugliest elements of government, which is shameless self-promotion and ego at the expense of elderly people who are dying, elderly people who go on to die, early years child education, public freedoms, etc., and even colleagues. I mean, this is a catastrophic advert for the current crop of politicians, Sir Geoffrey, yourself not included.
Well, I think there's I agree with a lot of that, Patrick, but I do think it's very easy to be wise with hindsight, particularly at the early stages. And I was rebelling at the later stages when I thought the whole thing had gone on too long. At the early stages, we thought 2.5 million people were going to be hospitalised, of which 400,000 were going to die. Those are figures produced from Spy M. So I think it's very, very easy to be wise with hindsight. And I think the government were too slow to react to the new variant of the virus and unlock us, as it were. And that is why I was voting against the government.
What does everyone say about Matt Hancock behind his back now, then?
Well, I think he's yesterday's figure, and I think everybody's quite pleased that he's not standing for Parliament again. And we need to move on from this whole COVID thing and try and do the right thing by the people of this government, this country.
Mm. OK, all right. And there were calls for him to be dragged back to Parliament and, in some cases, quite literally, actually, to face serious scrutiny as to why a centre for people with learning disabilities has still not been built in Bury North. The speculation there is that the MP in question there, who voted against Matt Hancock's lockdown rules and regs, was denied that centre for disabled children in his constituency because he did rebel. Do you think Matt Hancock should be dragged back to Parliament to face scrutiny over that?
Well, I think it's absolutely shocking if that is correct. That centre should have been built, and that member of Parliament should have stood up, as the rest of us did, against these lockdown arrangements. And yes, if Matt Hancock wants to come and make a statement to Parliament, I'm sure that would be welcome, so we can actually hear his side of the story.
You've got to admit, though, that Matt Hancock was aided and abetted by a willing media, OK? And that is something that winds me right up. And we've seen it today, Sir Geoffrey, with Rishi Sunak's thing about wanting to stop the boats. We've got the usual types, Robert Peston, in about 4.5 hours, managing to basically say to Rishi Sunak, "Oh, you heartless, how on earth can you be doing this? Were you born without a soul?" OK? And the media just lap it up. And you've got Matt Hancock there, who was able to deploy a new variant, scare the pants off the nation. All of these stats that turned out that they weren't necessarily always as accurate as they could have been. He knew he could dish all of this out unopposed because the media wanted harder, swifter, faster, longer lockdowns. And surely the media have a bit to blame here.
Yes, they do. The left-wing media do have a bit to blame. And but our job as politicians is to stand up for and be accountable at the next election for what we believe in. And I believe that what Suella's doing on these small boats is absolutely the right thing. Now, Robert may huff and puff. I have a lot of respect for Robert, but I think he's wrong. I think the British people do want us to take action on these boats. We've been very generous
There you go. And that's a key point. That's a key point, and I want to talk to you about that. Do you think it's insulting to the British people, actually, after the likes of Robert Peston and co stood up there and really pushed for lockdowns and pushed for restrictions to our freedoms, and then on top of that now they tried to say that we are not a generous country? You go and look at your average common man and woman's tax bill at the end of every single month, and you tell us that we're not generous people, Sir Geoffrey.
He is dead wrong, Patrick. We've taken in 60,000 people, Afghanistanis, Hong Kong people, Ukrainians. I mean, the British people have been one of the most generous in the world at taking in Ukrainian families. So I think it's absolutely dead wrong to say that we're not generous. And I think the British people do want us to do something about the unauthorised boats that come across the channel. I really do think that.
All right, now, just quickly, do you think that Matt Hancock should be banned from ever standing for public office ever again? Because I know that he wants to step down at the next election, but this guy, he's going to try and do an old Lazarus number, isn't he, at some point in his life? He's already tried it with the old I'm a celebrity nonsense and rumours of some other shows that he's been getting involved in. He wants a full-frontal revival at some point. Should we say, as a nation, Matt Hancock can never run for office again?
Well, that's a matter for Parliament, but I think, frankly, he's very unlikely to be selected for a seat to fight for Parliament again. So I think he's probably now finished his parliamentary career, and he better go off to an island to become a celebrity on the media and make comments as he likes on the media.
Can I ask you, Geoffrey, I spoke to you quite a bit during the old lockdown days, and I must say I always thoroughly enjoyed our conversations, as I have done tonight. There must have been a period of time when you really wrestled with the decision to go against what your own party was pushing. And that must have been a real moral decision for you. How do you feel now? I imagine you sleep very well at night.
It was a difficult decision at the time because I didn't know for sure that I was right. Had I and my colleagues got it wrong, and a huge number of more people had died as a result of our actions, then that would have been very uncomfortable indeed. So I don't regret what I did. I would do it again. I think it's absolutely right that members of Parliament stick up for what they think the British people would want and then be accountable at the next general election. And it needs people like me who are not going to be cowed from doing what they think is right.
Yeah, look, fantastic. I've just got to ask you one more, if that's all right, because I couldn't help but notice that Sir Graham Brady has decided to shuffle off. Now, he is, of course, an MP for Altrincham and Sale, and he is, more crucially, the chairman of the 1922 Backbench Committee. And, Sir Geoffrey, if he thought you were going to win the next election, he would stick around, would he not? He's only 55.
No, I think you've hit it on the nail on the head. The head on the nail there. He is only 55. You have to make a decision in life. If you're going to swap careers, there's an age which you have to do it by. And I suspect that Graham has got something else in mind, and he's made a good mark in politics. And I think he probably now feels the time is right to move on to something else.
And actually, it's worth noting as well that one of his final acts for his constituency was, as we understand it, to make sure that a hotel that was going to be used for the asylum seekers there was used predominantly to house women and children, not young single men. And I've got no doubt that the vast majority of the people in Altrincham and Sale West, I think it is, will be quite grateful of that. So, Geoffrey, thank you very much. Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, an absolute legend.
Thank you, Patrick.
That's all right. Now, a spokesperson for Matt Hancock said that the message exchange was an entirely partial account. Anyway, he added, the missing context here is vitally important because this vote was critical for saving lives. The right place to consider everything about the pandemic objectively is in the public inquiry. Yes, OK, all right. Coming up in Uncancelled, as Fergie denies the Sussex's claims that she is close with Meghan, esteemed royal biographer Tom Bower breaks down yet another fib from the Duke and Duchess. But next in Media Buzz, my superstar panel battle it out on whether the BBC licence fee needs to be axed after the broadcaster peddled blatant anti-Tory bias. Who'd have thought it, eh?
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yes, let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. And more front pages have just been delivered. Shall we find out what they say together? Express now. So the headline is, Richie lays down law. We decide who comes here. After the PM announced his illegal migration bill, the paper also quotes Sunak's response to GB News' Tom Harwood. That he is up for the fight with lawyers who attempt to block the bill. Good stuff, Tom. Now, the Mail leads with BBC TV boss's anger as Match of the Day presenter Gary Lineker likens the government's plans to tackle channel crossings to Nazi Germany. I mean, Gary. OK. The Daily Telegraph also leads with those calls for the BBC to sack Lineker after those Nazi migrant jibes. Meanwhile, Under Fire Cabinet Secretary Simon Case is said to not receive support of Rishi Sunak as his embarrassing COVID text messages are revealed in the lockdown files. The Guardian, OK, let's see what they're saying. Well, it's stopped short of Gary Lineker, I think, but they're accusing the government of removing the right for refugees to seek protection with the Tories' new plan to tackle small boats crossing the Channel. More on the Media Buzz now, though, with tonight's superstar panel. It is political commentator Suzanne Evans. I've got GB News presenter and commentator, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, the BBC is obviously state-funded and all of that. Well, they continue to push the boundaries of impartiality to the limit. And a segment on BBC Radio 4's comedy programme, The Skewer, or should that be The Sewer? No, I won't say it. Last week pushed those limits to a whole new level. Have a watch.
What do you call a corrupt far-right government?
Sonny Arbiter for unlawful conduct. Double trouble for Rishi Sunak. To give their mates contracts for PPE.
Mr Zahawi's tax affairs.
Mr Hancock rejected advice that all residents
going into care homes in England should be tested for the virus.
Well, no, I won't apologise. This appointment was arranged at the same time as your loan.
Richard Sharp knows absolutely nothing about my finances.
What you call a corrupt far-right government.
Huge numbers of people
The
are going on
largest
strike.
nursing strike in NHS history.
Teachers in England and
Thousands
Wales.
of rail workers protesting.
Postal workers, border force staff.
Oh, there we go. Anyway, there we have it. More evidence, not that we needed it, of the broadcaster's bias. So, with blatant anti-Tory propaganda like that, should we scrap the licence fee once and for all? And just as well, that was obviously what we had scheduled in to talk about, but in light of the fact that the front pages have just dropped and Gary Lineker has apparently compared the government policy to that of the Nazis, and there are calls, of course, to sack him as a result of that, I think it's probably only fair that we talk about that. So there we go. I'll bring you in first, Suzanne. Should they sack Lineker?
Yeah, absolutely. Gary Lineker called me stupid and then blocked me on Twitter. But who's looking stupid now? I mean, for goodness sake, controlling your borders and comparing that to Nazi Germany and the horror of all that. What a stupid man.
Calvin, I mean, look, the one thing I will say... Yeah, go on, Calvin, you just say about this, because should they sack Gary Lineker?
They never will, though, will they? How many mistakes does he have to make before they say enough is enough? This is anti-Semitism at this point. Get rid of him.
Do you think? Why did he say that?
Because he's going back to using Nazi Germany as an example to paint us as if we're Nazis for wanting to control our own borders. How is that a bad thing?
What do you think? You know, I mean, the way I would look at this is it's... Just don't bring up the Nazis. There's almost never a reason to bring up the Nazis.
I very strongly feel that the only time you should be talking about the Nazis is in terms of the Nazis. And if you're talking about the Holocaust or the Shoah, which is specific to the Jewish people, the Shoah. But it's never, ever a useful metaphor because there is not a direct comparator. There have been other genocides, and you can talk about those specific to genocide. It wasn't useful.
It's also very lazy, isn't it?
It's lazy, it's intellectually dishonest, it's just useless. But Gary Lineker will inevitably get fired eventually because the one, and I love the BBC, cut me and I bleed the BBC, but the one thing they're not good at is ageism, and he is...
Excuse me, whose panel are you on right now? This is not the BBC.
If they called, I'd
BBC fangirl.
OK, but they haven't, so... right, let's look, this is something... Now, I just can't help but think, we're talking about BBC bias, right? How can they have a guy like Gary Lineker there, whose job it is fundamentally to talk about football, supposedly, who can go on rampages and just openly say... I mean... What kind of damage could this do to someone? They go, if Rishi Sunak is deemed to be a Nazi, which, let's be honest, there is probably some issues about that comparison.
This is the thing they're trying to paint on purpose. The intro thing we keep hearing, they keep saying, what do you call a corrupt far-right government? Is it hard-right government?
Far-right government.
We haven't even had a right-wing government in this country, never mind a far-right government.
Implemented this yet.
But they're trying to paint it. They're trying to shift the Overton window further and further, aren't they?
But actually, almost like we planned it, we were, of course, here to talk about the licence fee. And technically, we pay Gary Lineker's wages to an extent. I mean, should we stop doing that at least?
Yeah, I mean, look, the BBC is a public service broadcaster. It's publicly funded. It has to be duly impartial. That's in its charter. It's the most used news source in the UK, although GBNews is catching up very fast. And it has much more of a responsibility. Now, I used to work for the BBC. And,
sorry to hear that.
I quite enjoyed it at the time, actually.
It's a wonderful
it's quite nice. And, yeah, I loved it. And there was... and I actually felt back then there was almost too much emphasis on balance, that even the most stupid argument had to be heard to balance something that was sensible.
More of a problem, honestly, when you get somebody say that, like, the sky's blue, OK, well, we need somebody who doesn't believe it.
It could be, but just to finish, I was one of the most strongest defenders of the licence fee because I thought it was great value for money. You got so many channels, website, local radio, all the rest of it. But I have completely changed my mind now.
The problem is you're forced to pay it, aren't you?
You're not forced to pay it. You don't have to consume it.
Let me finish my sentence.
Sorry.
Our wonderful viewers and listeners, if they want to watch this show, they have to pay Gary Lineker's salary at the BBC.
So they do.
That's the problem. If you want to watch content, you don't opt in to the BBC. You can't choose to subscribe like you can with Netflix, like you can with Sky. You are forced to pay as if it's a TV tab.
And this is why I've changed my mind.
You don't want to use any of
media landscape.
If you don't want to use any of it, you can choose not to. In exactly the same way that you don't currently have children and you still pay.
No, I don't consume any BBC content. Yeah, I still have to pay them to watch GB News. Why is that okay?
Because you are partaking in watching general television.
Then they call it a TV tax.
OK. Sidebar.
Go on.
The reason that the BBC is not great on being unbiased is that we have had the same government for 13 years. Therefore, they are commentating on what is actually happening. It's not really possible to make the same amount of satire about a government who aren't in power as the government who are in power. That's just not logical.
OK, so this sewer Oh, sorry, no, skewer.
It is called
skewer. You can tell she didn't even actually mean that.
And now I've
There you
fallen
go,
into
yeah.
your trap, Patrick.
Welcome to the sewer.
You know, I tried to listen to it. It's 14 minutes long. I managed 6 minutes, and it was just not just ridiculously biased.
It's not for
it was
it's
bad
different people.
Yeah, but who's it for, though? Trot?
Some people think...
It's like Trot TV, isn't
Some
it?
people really enjoy it. The BBC creates some of the best drama and television in the world.
And this was not it. This was not
for
it.
you it wasn't, but then I find Countryfile... I'm not saying that you like Countryfile, I wouldn't doubt
Most shows on the BBC are now full of this woke indoctrination.
Are you upset about
They're
Songs
all
of Praise?
cultural... Songs of Praise is rubbish. Countryfile said the countryside is racist now. All of them have a social justice warrior lesson to shove down our throats.
Hear me out on this, OK? So Gary Lineker can go and say whatever the heck he likes. He can go and campaign to remain in the European Union. He can, apparently, anyway.
Because he's a sports commentator, is his logic.
Right, cool, call the Tories, compare them to the Nazis and all of this stuff. If I came out, as I have done, and said I wouldn't particularly like to live next door to a migrant hotel, based around safety concerns for me primarily, I wouldn't get a job at the BBC. Not that I want one anyway, but I wouldn't. So it's a double standard.
That's not the whole problem, is it? And also, you haven't been employed there yet, so they'd be doing it...
But you're allowed one kind of bias, aren't you? But you're not allowed another.
You're allowed one that makes fewer people cross, and Gary Lineker seems to enough that people don't...
I would argue that it's because that people are too afraid to come out and say what they really think, that people think that it makes fewer people cross.
Honestly, the fundamental core of council culture is that you can get away with what people will allow you to get away with because they like you. Ricky Gervais has said more transphobic, let's not get bogged down in details, things, than J.K. Rowling. Ricky Gervais is better liked than J.K. Rowling, therefore Ricky Gervais gets away with it, J.K. Rowling doesn't. Ultimately,
I'm sorry, but that's a nonsense. J.K. Rowling was the most esteemed, most loved author in this country.
The people don't like her for lots of reasons, not least that she is a woman.
Well, I think the greatest irony in all of that for me is the fact that Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint would be stacking shelves in Lidl if it wasn't J.K. Rowling, and they should actually...
No, they had rich parents.
Right, there you go. Actually, yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, they'd be stacking shelves in Waitrose. Anyway, right, coming up, the crowning moment of the show as Labour's controversial new Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, continues to draw criticism. Will she be nominated for Greatest Britain or Union Jackass? But next in Uncancelled, after the Sussexes disrespect King and Country by confirming their attendance at the coronation, Sarah Ferguson has weighed in on the couple's war with the Windsors. I will get unfiltered reaction from royal expert and Meghan's biographer, Tom Bauer. Don't you dare move.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, the Sussex's so-called truth continues to crumble around them after Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, poured doubt on the claim that she taught Meghan how to curtsy for the Queen. In an interview with The Telegraph, Fergie said, "I don't really know Meghan. I haven't really met her," adding, "I spoke to her at the funeral and I thought she looked absolutely beautiful. I think she is beautiful." And this flies in the face of claims made by the Montecito moaners in both that Oprah interview and Harry's book, Spare, or should that be Where, or indeed Spite, that Fergie had been a crucial part of their lives while in the royal family.
Very quickly, right in front of the house, we just practiced and then walked in. And
you and Harry practiced?
Yeah, and Fergie ran out and she said, "Are you ready? Do you know how to curtsy?" I said, "Oh my goodness, you guys."
Sorry. OK, right. Despite the lack of interaction, though, Fergie still offered some advice for the couple amid their never-ending bust-up with the press.
Did you have any advice for Harry or Meghan?
I think the best way to answer that is to really take hold of your own self and lead by example. I wouldn't give advice. I would say that your actions speak louder than words, and I feel really strongly about that.
Well, joining me now to weigh in is renowned royal biographer, it's Tom Bauer. Tom, thank you very much. Is Meghan allergic to the truth?
Well, her truth is her weapon. Our truth is her enemy. That's the real problem. But this is a battle. This is a real battle for the truth and a battle for the monarchy that we're now facing.
Indeed. Now, obviously, Harry is caught up in all of this. And look, I don't mind saying, we were having a little chat just a moment ago there, and you've got a bit of a theory about why Harry continues to go along with this stuff.
Well, I think what's really happening at the moment, I mean, that extraordinary exchange with the therapist on Saturday. On reflection, here is one of the heirs to the throne, sixth in line, who goes on TV to not only confess that he is suffering mental problems, but says that the solution to his problems were, amongst many other drugs, illegal psychedelic drugs, which was an astonishing thing to say, that he felt much better if he took these mind-bending drugs. And his whole manner in that hour on Saturday, it was all about himself. It was very self-indulgent. Criticism, of course, about his father and the whole royal family and all the rest of it. But at the end of it, you thought, this selfish, self-indulgent, rather dim man, what is he doing? Why is he pouring this out? Now, firstly, of course, he loves the publicity. Here he is, he's completely uncontrolled. He can attack everyone and gets lots of attention. And he's now become a chronic attention seeker.
Like a seal at a zoo.
He really is, and he loves it. And he's earning his money from it. That's his whole... Attacking the royal family now has become his... main source of income. But I then reflected there's something even more sinister about this all, because ever since the Netflix series, we've had Harry and endless interviews to promote his book, and now up comes this 1 hour extravaganza with a very weird quack who believes in therapy and admits all sorts of sins and all the rest of it. But there's no Meghan. And what is fascinating is that Meghan, the person who really fired up this whole crisis, is absent. And I began thinking that really this is really very clever of her. She is sending Harry out to fight her battle. She stays in obscurity. He fights, she's using him to fight her enemies. That's the Windsor family, the royal family. He is the one who can take all the flak, and she stands back. So he has become now her puppet in a way which was not clear, I think, until Saturday.
Yes, I mean, obviously you could imagine that his mouth is moving purely because Meghan has her hand inserted somewhere and it's right up there like a puppet. You could picture that, couldn't you, really? But when it comes to this kind of stuff now, do you not think it is really noticeable that Harry was next to Meghan when she was telling her truth? I mean, they wheeled him in like a, I don't know, an idiot, really, after this Oprah interview. But when it comes to Meghan now, she is separate. She is distinct. She's leaving him on her own. And I can't help but wonder whether or not she's trying to let him create this picture as damaged goods and that she's there to look after him and this is what she's got to deal with at home. Your views on that?
Well, I think that many people thought that Harry was brainwashed when he was still in England and that when he went to California and she promised him freedom, he grabbed it because he was besotted by her and it was all about his neediness. Now it's got, I think, much worse. she now is completely manipulating him to fight her battle against the royal family, because the coronation, which is the most important event to come, and for many years, is, of course, will give King Charles his whole status for the rest of his short reign. And if Harry is able to destabilise it, if Harry, by playing his games, by attacking the king more and more, is able to...
Can I just ask on this one, because there are strong schools of thought that suggest that Harry is not particularly bright, OK? And Meghan, if she is just a pound-shop Z-list actress, surely the full might of the monarchy should be able to overcome unnecessary distractions from Winch and Ginge, and they've not been able to do that yet, and I find that weird.
Well, you're right, and I think that's very much because King Charles is weak, he's worried, he's, on the whole, he's not a decisive man who wants to, in the end, axe Harry and Meghan from the scene. Now, I do think that his decision to evict them from Frogmore was a sign of great optimism for those of us who've been advocating, especially on this programme, that he should be tougher.
I heard a little rumour about that, and that rumour was that essentially William wanted them nowhere near the royal circle because he didn't trust them around the other royal children that there would be there, because he didn't want them indoctrinated by this rubbish.
Well, I don't think William wants him in the picture, full stop. And he's quite right, and more to the point, I think Kate doesn't, because she's been insulted by Meghan and Harry. And I think Camilla, the Queen, also, having been called the wicked stepmother, does want Harry there. So I think the eviction from Frogmore is the first stage. But he's got to do more, Charles. He's got to say to Harry, of course you're invited, my dear son, but it's row 54 for you behind the column. Do you still want to come? And I think, in the end, what happened on Saturday and Meghan's invisibility is all, in the end, a threat to Charles, that Meghan is playing the shots and he's now got to answer back and cut them down.
Look, it's a question that's worthwhile being asked, given the context of what we've just spoken about. I mean, do you actually fear that Harry is a victim of some kind of quite nasty domestic issues here?
Well, he's a victim of his own stupidity and his own folly, and he's a victim as well, in the sense now, of Meghan, who's playing him. But the only way to stop the whole thing is for the king to actually announce...
It's lies and lies and lies, isn't it? I mean, this idea now that Fergie can come out and go, well, I've never actually really met Meghan. Why? I mean, why would she sit there in front of Oprah and say, oh, she taught me how to curtsy?
Well, because in the end, that is actually irrelevant whether she knows Fergie. We know that there were 17 major lies in the Oprah Winfrey interview.
But it's just another one, isn't it?
And we know it's another one. But his book was full of distortions too, Harry's book. And we're now faced with a crisis, growing crisis. Will the coronation be overshadowed by the Montecito too, or is Harry going to be expelled and King Charles will take
Well, I
control?
quite like the idea that Harry takes a bit of ayahuasca just before the ceremony, and then it really kicks off, doesn't it? But Tom, thank you very, very much. Tom Bauer there, who is, of course, the royal biographer. Well, it is time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass, and, of course, to do that is Suzanne Evans, Calvin Robinson and Rebecca Reid. Yes, there we go. I'll get the hang of this show one day. So, Suzanne, I will start with you. I think we're going to go with Greatest Britain first, are we, ladies and gentlemen? So, let's do it then.
OK, so that's going to be Isabel Oakeshott for outing Matt Hancock as the nasty piece of work that he is. Ignore the flak, Isabel. Right's on your side. The country's behind you.
OK, a strong start, Calvin.
Isabel Vaughan Spruce, this is the lady who has been arrested for praying silently in her own head. We have the thought police in the United Kingdom, and the parliamentarians pushed this law through today.
OK, all right. And Rebecca?
Vanity Von Glow, who appeared on Calvin's show at the weekend to discuss drag story time. It's really nice to see the people involved in the conversation having the conversation for a change.
Thank you for watching.
I believe we can watch a bit of it again.
This isn't the first conversation about appropriate behaviour that I've had with a man in a collar. Well, first of all, it's important for me to say, because I have made a defence of Drag Queen Story Hour on this channel, on the basis that Drag Queen Storytime in the UK, in the instances that I've seen it, is not a striptease-style burlesque show. That's a different conversation from the Cabba Baba Rave conversation that's in the news today.
OK, well, look, all of those are strong choices for Greatest Britain, but this week's winner is Calvin Robinson, because I've decided that I'm going to go Oh, no, apparently it says Isabel Oakeshott. I don't think actually the one that I chose, but there we go. I'm being shouted at and I'll say it was. But there you go. Well done, Suzanne. It's a hollow victory.
It's a good one.
You know what, Suzanne? Yeah, you should take that victory and feel really hollow about it now. Right, OK, let's find out who your union jackasses are. Suzanne, I'll start with you.
So my union jackass is Sue Gray, former second permanent secretary to the Cabinet. She helped bring down Boris Johnson over Partygate, and now she's become Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff. Shame on her, and shame on Keir Starmer for appointing her.
OK, Calvin, the nation's winner. Go on.
Cathy Newman, because her interview with Isabel Oakeshott was symptomatic of the mainstream media's take. This is the largest scandal since Watergate, for goodness sake, and all she's bothered about is why did you sell it to the Telegraph? How much did you make for it? It's outstanding.
Yeah, I did think that was quite funny, actually. Rebecca?
Mine's Suella Braverman for continuing to just say mean things and then do nothing about it, making literally everybody cross.
What has she said that's mean?
Everything. All of it.
No examples.
We don't have
Not a single example.
OK, all right. Right, then. Well, let's see if I can get this one right. The winner of the Union Jackass is Sue Gray. That's right. There we go. And, of course, Suzanne Evans. So, in a way, Suzanne, you've managed to win both things there, but so well done. Good stuff. Yes.
Again, I did it last week too.
Loads of unanswered questions when it comes to Sue Gray. Well, look, I must say, this show has been an absolute rip-roar. I will be back again in this very chair. Looking forward, of course, to covering yet again for Dan Wootton. I think I might have a little bit of time, actually, just to ask about Sue Gray, but I'm not going to do it, actually. Right, OK. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. I will be back again for more absolute carnage and chaos, this time tomorrow, 9 o'clock until 11. I would just like to say thank you so much to everyone with all your kind words on social media. I am just filling in the hot seat for the man himself, the absolute TV legend, the behemoth, Dan Wootton. Make sure you have a lovely evening, everybody. I'll be back tomorrow. Peace out. Mwah.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone.
My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes and Kerr.
Come and join us. GB News, the people's channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.